Hello, everyone, and welcome to my new show, Out of Nowhere. Well, my guest today is Christopher O'Brien. Since 1992, Christopher has investigated over 1,000 paranormal events reported in the San Luis Valley, located in south central Colorado. Can we please welcome Christopher to the show? Hello there.
Hi, thanks for having me, Bob.
Hey, thank you for being here. Um, I've been looking at your book, Stalking the Herd. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Wow, where do I start? It's an attempt to give a blow by blow, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year breakdown of the emergence of the unexplained livestock death phenomenon, mostly during its height in the Midwest United States in the mid 1970s. But I go into worldwide cases, including quite a number of cases there in the UK. And I look at I think what's really important also is I look at the history of our relationship with cattle, how humans have relied on cattle for about 12,000 years now, and the process that cattle worship took over the intervening years. The first 6,000 years of our relationship with cattle was domesticating them to try to breed docility into them. The original animals that were bred were called aurochs, and they were uh, almost twice as big as today's cattle, and really fierce wild animals. Very very dangerous. Some of them stood 12 feet tall, weighed over 3,500 pounds, and
Oh my God.
the the first real domestication of cattle occurred in northern Iran about 12,500 years ago, and this is where coincidentally where we first find evidence of beer and wine being made. And I kind of been wondering when I'm doing my research whether it took the invention of some alcoholic spirits to get all juiced up to have the nerve to go out and try to steal babies from these ferocious wild animals to try to start your own herd. And evidently they were successful
Yeah.
because all your domesticated cattle today are derived from a single herd of 80 animals in northern Iran 10,500 years ago. And it's interesting to see how cattle have played a very important part in the establishment of belief systems in humans, and establishment of belief systems that we see vestiges of to this day. And it's interesting that worship of the cow, the female aspect, seemed to kind of go in the east, in India and other parts of Asia, where cattle were revered and still are to this day for the gifts that they give, which is the milk, and primarily, and they if a cow wants to walk in your house in India, by law you're supposed to allow it to do that, and it's considered very good luck. Of course, I wouldn't want to be behind it cleaning up after it, but
Right.
there's nursing homes in India for cattle,
Exactly.
believe it or not. Yeah, and so you have this veneration of the female aspect of cattle, or the cow. And if you go to the west, you have the bull being the primary type of cow, or head of cattle that is worshipped. And you have the rise of entire civilizations, uh, like the civilization at Catalhuic, the ancient city that is in Anatolia, that they've 20 years ago they finished uncovering the ruins, and everywhere you look there's effigies of bulls. And then of course you have the Minoan civilization that arose from bull worship. And then today We have the western version is running after the bulls or running with them in Pamplona, or
Ah,
trying to
right.
trying to stay in the bull ring without getting gored, or try to stay on the back of a bull for 8 seconds in the Wild West here in the U.S. So the bull riding, professional bull riding. So cows have played a very interesting role in human history, and I go through and really examine humans' relationship with cattle for the last almost 12,000 years, and it's a very intriguing thing, and I think we need to always keep in context our ancient venerated relationship with cattle, and so um, the middle part of the book then dives, and that's how I start the book with the history of cattle. Then the middle part of the book goes into the actual establishment of the mystery of the unexplained livestock death phenomenon, better known now as cattle mutilations. And it's not only cattle, it's, as you know, there in England, sheep are the primary animals, livestock that are targeted and predated upon. And Philip Hoyle and
Yeah.
the Animal Field Pathology Unit, um, the Richard T. Hall, there's been Tony Dowd, there's been a number of very fine investigators that have chased after some of these cases over the years. And we've had some uh, pretty interesting waves of activity that have happened, including the earliest documented accounts of official accounts of cattle mutilations or livestock mutilations, and that was in 1605 in England, there around London, where hundreds of sheep were being mutilated, and nobody could figure out why. They were just taking the some inward parts and leaving the rest to rot. You know, the wool, the some tallow was taken. I guess maybe they needed the tallow to make fireworks or something. But that was all part of the official records of the court of James I. That's the earliest known documentation of livestock mutilation that we can find. And so England does play, I think, a pivotal role in this. And we've had some pretty interesting horse slashing cases over the years too that are very perplexing. Horses being attacked and mutilated, some uh, not even being killed, being able to survive horrific knife attacks, and they've never really been able to get to the bottom of it. The closest they came was in 1902 when a Hindi-born Christian preacher was tried and convicted of horse slashing. Although Charles Fort, in his book "The Damned," called it a cattle mutilation for some reason, even though it was a horse. And this preacher got convicted and sent to jail, and it took the efforts of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer and celebrity who,
Oh, yeah.
of course, we all know from our Sherlock Holmes, books and stuff. He was the one that wrote Sherlock Holmes, and also investigated the Coddington ferries and was very interested in the paranormal at the turn of the century. And he convinced the court there in England, in the Midlands there, that it was an unfair trial. They used evidence that wasn't properly obtained, and he put enough doubt into the mind of the jury or the judge there that they released him, and then the charges were dropped. So when people say no one's ever been charged with an animal mutilation, correct them and say, yeah, there was one guy in 1902, but he managed to beat the charges when he was retried. So um, that's that was alerted, that particular case I was alerted to by Nick Redfern, who was actually born and raised in the town where this all happened. So he was quite familiar with the story. And when he heard I was writing Stalking the Herd, he immediately contacted me and said, "You got to include this." And so, of course, I did. So the book goes on after the case histories, which is the whole middle third of the book. The case histories goes into, like I said, a day by day, week by week, month by month uh, breakdown of all the cases that occurred around the world, including seals getting mutilated in the Orkney Islands, 50 dolphin being found mutilated off the coast of
Mm,
France, a wallaby mutilated in the Dartmouth, England Zoo, and 6 months later, A wallaby was mutilated in the zoo in Jackson,
In where I,
Mississippi. So the only two wallabies we've ever had were mutilated were in zoos in cages.
exactly, Chris, Christopher. We have a zoo in Briglington, and the wallabies there got sliced as well.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I'd love to know more.
And
Maybe.
yeah, yeah. Because Paul
Wow.
looked into that about,
Uh,
and then he looked into other cases and rang around different zoos in the UK at the same time, and same thing were happening all over the place.
yeah. Yeah. It was pretty. I mean, we
I
were
bet
we
it
were getting
was
at the height of it, we were getting eight separate cases in eight different locations. I think in six different states in one night. So when people say it's some Satanist or occult, blood sacrifice or something, they must be pretty well financed, and there must be a lot of
They
them if
always
they're able
say that.
to if they're able to hit 6 to 8 different places at once in one night, spread around the
Exactly.
Midwest. I kind of I don't think so. There is a ritual blood sacrifice element to all this, but I don't think it ties into to your neighborhood devil worshippers. So anyway, then I go in the book. I go into
True.
some of the stranger cases that really make you scratch your head and go, hmm. And I look at how the media plays a big role in propagating the the erroneous identification of misidentified scavenger action as being a real cattle mutilation. The vast majority of these cases are mundane, and it's people that don't know what they're looking at, uh, thinking that they're seeing something that is high strange when any vet or veterinary pathologist or even a rancher would tell you, no, that was just scavengers. Um, that's to say that I'd say about 80%, 75% of cases are actually due to scavenger action. You can't say that about that in England because you don't have the type of scavenging animals there that we do here. Your scavengers are smaller, and there's not as
True.
many of them. Our scavengers, the coyotes and even wolves, and packs of wild dogs. There's even vultures can take down and kill a calf and scavenge it. Black vultures are quite predatory, which I didn't know until I did some research. So I look at all the various theories that have been put forward through the years about who's responsible, and I trace back where all these theories started, like the Satanist theory, the military, bacteriological weapons testing, the military doing societal programming, manipulation, keeping the ranching population in a place of fear. There's all kinds of potential explanations for this, and I go to great lengths backtracking and looking at how all these particular theories started. And then I look at the theory that I think there's two theories that really have the most evidence to support them. And the first one is the environmental monitoring theory. It seems that these animals, at least in the United States, um, are found in regions that are downwind and downstream of where we utilize uranium in power plants and missiles and missile fields, in weapons enrichment facilities, the uranium mines. If you go downwind and downstream, those are the areas of highest incidence that report cattle mutilations on and off over the years. And so if you overlay a map of above ground pollution from 100 nuclear tests that we did during the 50s and 60s and into the early 70s,
Yeah.
if you look at the map of where the radiation was spread in the environment, and then overlay a map of where these animal deaths, mutilations, if you will, have occurred. There's a perfect
Very.
match. It's uncanny when you look at it. So I think David Perkins was the one that came up with this particular theory in 1979. And when we had the Fukushima event in 2011, where the two reactors melted down, I told David that, hey, we're going to probably see some cattle mutilation cases on the West Coast. Now, in the United States, you have to understand, west of the Rockies, from the Rockies to the California coast, and Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, parts of Western Nevada, Oregon, um, Victoria, BC, Victoria, rather, Vancouver Island, and British Columbia. They don't have the number of cases that they do east of the Rockies, which is just hundreds and hundreds of cases. And so they're a lot more. It's a lot more rare to hear about them. And so I predicted that we were going to have a wave of cases on the West Coast because of the Fukushima event. And sure enough, we've had over 200 cases that have occurred in Oregon and probably in Northern California and in Southern Washington as well. Although we don't have the evidence to support those particular rumors, but we do have evidence to support the cases in Oregon. And these were areas that were hit with the radiation plume, the cloud of radiation that came over right after the initial meltdown. So there is some evidence to support an environmental monitoring theory. And then there's the theory that really was started by looking at your outbreak of mad cow disease in the from '86 to '94, horrific.
Yeah.
Today people in England that have been vegetarians for 30, 40 years are dying of mad cow disease in humans, which has been called Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease. And then, of course, right on the heels of the outbreak of mad cow, when nobody knew what was causing it, they didn't know about prions, the misfolded proteins that actually create, the holes in the nerve tissue that create the dementia and the twitching of limbs. And it's very, very similar to advanced Alzheimer's or
Oh
advanced
yeah.
dementia in humans. Before we knew all that, um,
Parkinson's as
of course, the authorities in England were beside themselves. They didn't know what to do. And then you had on top of the mad cow, you had hoof and mouth disease break out. And so that's when the government in '96 said, that's it. We're going to
they
destroy
did.
every single head of livestock in the British Isles. And they did. 4.5 million cattle were destroyed. And the bone ash was stored in these old blimp hangars from World War II. And then it was sold as fertilizer in 70 different countries around the world. That's just before they found out that the
Us.
prions survive in the bone ash, that you can't kill them. They'll go dormant, but then they'll reanimate and they'll be infectious. And so uh, kind of draw your own conclusions on that one. So I really have a feeling that one of the most powerful lobbies, political lobbies in this country, is the beef industry. It's the largest income producer in agriculture. More money is produced by selling beef than any other agricultural product. And the beef industry is incredibly powerful and very, very low key. You never hear about them. And I think that there is a real
No, you
fear.
never do.
No, never. Unless you're Oprah Winfrey and you blurt out on your show after doing a show on mad cow disease and blurt out, "I'm never going to eat another hamburger again." The next day, she was sued for $1 billion. The next day, she was sued for $1 billion by the beef industry, and it took her a year and
Next
$1
day.
million to beat it to win the lawsuit. But the beef industry may be involved in this, and they may be sending teams around sampling various cattle from various regions, looking for the potential uh, evidence of mad cow disease in the food chain. I think that they're deathly afraid of this occurring. And the chief scientist at the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, NIDS, the guys that were up at the Skinwalker Ranch there in Utah for 10 years, trying to figure out what was going on there. The managing
Yeah.
director of that effort, Colm Kelleher, he wrote a book called Brain Trust, and it's looking at the history of mad cow disease, and he pretty much establishes that it was weaponized by the Army Chemical Corps and at Fort Detrick, and it got loose into the environment from two biophysical labs, one in Colorado, one in southern Wyoming, and right at the time when the animal death, the mutilation thing hit the papers and started becoming prevalent. Um, and he's also looked at known outbreaks of mad cow disease in Canadian herds and in some northern U.S. herds, and then immediately cattle mutilations occurring in around the area where these mad cow cases are being identified. So I really recommend the book. It's very hard to get. Nobody bought it. It didn't go into additional printings. But if you can get a copy of it, it's called Brain Trust, Combe Kelleher.
Right.
I recommend it highly. It is written by a world class scientist, and it's just you look at that you look at your hamburger a little differently every time you have one. So that's basically the book in a nutshell.
I
When I
bet you
finished it,
do as well.
yeah, I do. It was 900 pages when I finished, and I took 300 pages out to include in a follow up book, which will be an analysis of the first book. And I'm quite proud of it. I don't think anyone's ever going to come along and write a more objective, a more thorough and inclusive book. I pretty much splashed the old mud puddle dry with it. How many books are there on ghosts? How many books are there on UFOs? How many books are there on crypto creatures? How many books are there on any paranormal phenomenon? There's shelves and shelves and shelves, hundreds and hundreds of books. But this is the only book that you'll find
Oh, yeah,
that
exactly.
really objectively looks at the animal mutilation phenomenon in a dispassionate, objective way. And I'm quite proud of it. And unfortunately, it's not a very sexy subject, so it's kind of a hard
You
sell
should.
to a lot of people. They don't want to know. They put their fingers in their ears and go, no, 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 no,
Yes,
don't tell me. No, I don't want to know. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. And I do urge everybody,
yeah.
if
Yeah,
you know
I was going to
England, it
say,
costs more to send
Paranormal,
it
if
there.
anybody's got any
So if
questions,
you
just put them in capital.
is there what now?
Yeah, I was just saying, anybody got any question, put them in capital. Anybody got any questions in the chat room, put them in capitals, and I will relay them to Christopher. So what do you think's behind all this? I know you were saying about, is it the government? Um, is it the military?
There's multiple groups
Because I know
involved.
Skinwalker
It's not
Ranch, there were
it's not
UFO.
a one it's not a one size fits all scenario. There's multiple groups involved with their own agendas, different agendas.
I know at Skinwalker, there were a sighting of a UFO over a cow when they noticed,
Nah,
and it dropped to the floor,
nah.
and then it bloated and died.
That UFO wasn't over the cow. It was 5-6 miles away. If you look at it carefully and analyze it, it looks like it. Sure, it's positioned over the cow, but it was actually
Oh yeah,
quite. It was quite a bit in the distance. So they stretched my credulity a little bit with that one. I was the first investigator at Skinwalker back in '96, and I can safely say it's a real case. That this isn't some PR stunt to make money off a TV show or fleece the government for $20 million, which was several people have argued that it's all been a publicity stunt. It's all been a way for Robert Bigelow to get paid back for all the money he spent at Skinwalker, and then that didn't pan out in any answers. I don't think so. I think that Terry Sherman, the rancher who I met and walked around with, he was in real genuine fear of the safety and well-being of his family, and he really wanted to sell the ranch to
mm.
someone that could
What's it
study it. Go ahead.
right? What's it like being on Skinwalker Ranch then? What's it like walking around?
Oh, it was just like any ranch.
Did you feel anything yourself?
No, no, not particularly. He showed me some of the. It took 6 tons of weight to punch these holes in the ground that are laid out in a 40-foot triangle, and there was quite a number of them, and they were punched into hardpan, into real dry, hard dirt, compacted soil. And he had an expert from an oil exploration company that his job was to figure out how much weight a particular section of earth can support heavy equipment, and so he would be the one that would say, "Yeah, you can put your 10-ton, you know, rig right here, and it's not going to sink in. And if you come in this way, you'll be able
Yeah.
to, be able to set it down." And so he had this guy come and do a tested the soil, and he said that it was the holes needed 9 tons of weight in order to press that far into the hard pan. So these are substantial craft that are coming through these portals. He said these portals would open up in the air, and the craft would kind of float. Triangle craft would float through, and then shoot off or send out these little refrigerator-sized glowing objects, these rectangles, these like squares. And he said that last time it had happened about 2 weeks before I got there. He said it opened up, and he said it must have been a rookie driver because he came flying through so fast that he didn't stop in time, and he sheared off the tops of his cottonwood trees. And I said, "You're kidding?" And he goes, "No, let's here." And we walked over there, and sure enough, there's the tops of the cottonwood trees laying there. And 40, 50 feet up, you can see the tops of the trees have been snapped off, not cut, snapped off. And
No,
it was
no.
pretty fresh. There was still some evidence of them being alive because it's only 2 weeks before. Most of them have been dried out already because the branches died. But there was some evidence that had been, these things have been up there just in fairly recent time frame. So my the way I do investigations is I don't. My first visit to a site and my first introduction to a witness, I don't pester them with a lot of questions. I don't record anything. I let them feel completely comfortable and get to know the guy or the woman and allow them to get to know me, establish trust, and establish a level of communication that is totally dictated by the witness. And I thought that this was going to be the beginning of a long case that I would be coming back up. It was 400 miles from my house, but the only case that took me out of the San Luis Valley. But I was ready to really dig deep into this one because it was so incredible. And for the next month, I couldn't make it back up there, but I was talking to Terry almost every day on the phone. Even right during events, when the events were happening, he called me one time and was giving me a blow by blow account of what was going on with this. These blue orbs were chasing his horses, and they buzzed his wife, and then went by the barn, and all the lights dimmed, and then took off into the across the pasture into the forest, and his three dogs went chasing after him, and he said, "Look, I got to call you back. My dogs took off after this thing." So he never did call me back. So I called him back the next morning, and I said, "What happened last night? I was waiting for you to call." And he goes, "You know what? I went out there this morning. I was too afraid to go out there last night, but I went out this morning, and all I found, I didn't find my dogs, but I found three, burned grease piles that had been his dogs. They were melted with high heat, and all they were like grease
Oh,
piles." He said, and that incident was mentioned in the book Hunt for the Skinwalker, but they got the date wrong. They said it was April '95. It was actually August '96 when it happened because I wrote it down and I was on the phone with the guy. So then he signed the
hmm.
Robert Bigelow worked out a deal with him and bought the ranch. Not for what Terry was asking for it. He got a real bargain, but he made Terry sign a non-disclosure agreement, and Terry couldn't talk to me anymore. So that was the end of that. Uh, I don't know if you guys get the show
Oh,
over there, the hunt the secret
yeah,
secret
we
of
do
Skinwalker
skinwalker.
Ranch.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
A lot of people are saying it's just hokey and they're sensationalizing everything. I disagree. I think they're doing a very good job covering their scientific approach to studying whatever's going on there. I think some of their speculation is a little tongue in cheek and should be taken with a grain of salt. But I think that the people that are involved are not doing this for money. They're not doing this for fame. They're really trying to come up with scientific rationales of why these types of events are occurring there, and I really do
Okay.
support and applaud their efforts. As soon as it gets to the point where they have to start making up stuff, then I'll probably publicly change my mind. But until someone can prove that they're not on the level, I'm going to accept them at face value and applaud their efforts. I don't think Brandon Fugel uh, is doing this to make money. He's got enough money already. He's the Mormons' commercial real estate agent for the Mormon Church. The guy's got more money than he knows what to do with.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah, so he's truly a
Ed
secret.
must have.
Say again.
I know they're always saying, in the cattle mutilations and sheep and everything like that, they always say it's something satanic. There's somebody going out there at night time and slicing them, cutting open. But I've seen some of the sheep and there's no blood at all. They've been cut open, sometimes holes in them, in the face, but there's no blood anywhere.
Well,
If
when
somebody was
the
slicing
animal
something
dies,
open, there'd be blood
if
everywhere.
you if you kill an animal with some sort of non-invasive method, whether it be poison food or gas or something, and then let the animal sit there for a few hours, the blood pressure in the animal is going to subside, and so when you cut it, it's not going to bleed because the heart's not pumping blood through the vascular system. So there are some things that people should really be aware of the pathology of these events and I've had ranchers tell me they drain this thing of blood, and I say, here, give me a hand, and we'll flip the thing over, and wherever the cuts are, wherever the parts that are been cut out, the blood comes rushing out from deep in the body cavity where it's collected from gravity, and so looking down at an animal that's been supposedly mutilated, it does look like the thing's been drained of blood. But if you turn it over, all that, a lot of the moisture, of course, in the desert where I live, um, will wick away and it'll evaporate, but it leaves behind um, the hemoglobin and the other constituent elements of the serum in the blood is left behind, and that's still in a semi-liquid form, and so that will come flowing out. And I've surprised quite a number of ranchers with that particular approach of showing them that no, your Bessie didn't wasn't drained of blood. The blood's there. It's just gone down to the deepest part of the body cavity with gravity. So, out of the 200 cases that I personally investigated, 160 I I couldn't determine whether it was high strange or just natural predation and unusual scavenger action. Um, Oftentimes these animals, if they've eaten poison plants, if they drank bad water, a lot of the bigger scavengers won't touch them. The birds will, and the birds will come down and peck out the eye and peck out the soft tissue
Fair.
organs. And I've seen magpies drill perfect circles in the rear end of cows. You could take a protractor and draw a circle, and it would match the precision of the magpie's work on the rear end of a cow. So 160, I couldn't determine, whether it was high strange or not. Then 40 of them definitely something did that. Something with intelligence, using tools, most of the time using scalpels, except for I think 3 or 4 cases, um, were responsible because you could tell because the hair was cut. That's the first thing I look for is cut hair follicles. If you can find a line of hair that's been cut, you can see the hair is shorter because it's been cut. No animal or insect or bird or
Mm,
scavenger or predator can cut hair in a straight line.
can do that.
And nothing can do that except a sharp implement. And so if you have cut hair follicles, that's going to be your litmus test for it being a case that needs to be investigated as high strange. And those 40 cases all featured cut hair follicles. And out of those, about 7 or 8 of them, um, well, first, 4 of them were cut with high heat because I had tissues analyzed from the incisional area. And the pathologist came back and said, or the hematologist in this case, he didn't get his pathology degree for a couple of years after this, but he said, yeah, I found cooked hemoglobin. I found cauterized tissue. So this was done with some sort of lasing instrument,
Oh, Christ.
something that was generating heat. And so it was conclusive in 3 cases. He had evidence in a fourth, but he wasn't willing to sign off on it. And then out of the other 36 cases, they were all done with a sharp cutting implement. And so that's what you're looking at, 10%. 10% of these cases, 20%, 10 to 20% of these reports uh, are of a high strange nature based on my uh, my experience.
So, when you're talking about the 40% or anything, do you think aliens are involved?
No, I think that's the least likely explanation. Um, Linda Howe's made a quite a career touting the alien scenario as being behind this, and there are very very few cases with no evidence whatsoever that aliens have been coming to this planet uh, to do to predate on livestock. It doesn't make any sense. The rationale is, well, their dying race needs the genetic material to hybridize, uh, you know, their offspring so that they can reinvigorate their species. And my answer to that is, why go sneaking around in some pasture in New Mexico when all you have to do is go into a slaughterhouse and there's thousands of gallons of genetic material in big vats. You can get as much as you want. It doesn't make any sense. It's not the animals per se that are being targeted. It's where the animals are in the environment. That's the important thing here. That Linda and Chuck Zukowski and Margie Kay and some of the alien fans of this
Where?
particular mystery, uh, they forget that we there's a lot easier ways. Occam's razor. I mean, the shortest and simplest answer is usually the correct one. I don't think these things are being uh, taken for their genetic material. There's plenty of genetic material, much easier to obtain than doing these very complicated experiments out in the field. These are experienced surgeons that are doing this, and it's not kids out cattle tipping, pushing cows over when they're asleep and making them fall over. It's not Satanists getting parts for some ritual. Although there is some evidence to suggest that some cases have been done by black magic or Satanist type practitioners. I had a case where the parts that were taken were put into a plastic bag and hung from from twine from a branch right over the cow. I've had cases where all the cows have been combed out, all the tail and the body of the cow had been combed out very carefully, and which was very unusual. I've had cases where they snipped off just little bits of the animal, which is pretty unusual. It's a standalone case. And these possibly were due to people that came along after seeing a cow that was already dead, and then taking out knives and taking bits and pieces of the animal to take for whatever pseudo religious purpose maybe that they needed it for. But I think most of these animals are being tested for mad cow disease and for environmental pollutants. There's some. There's one theory that you can find heavy metals and you can find um, oil, evidence of oil in the environment where cows are grazing, and so maybe they're being used as prospecting tools for some sort of minerals, metals and hydrocarbons. Um, but the alien thing just doesn't make any sense. Why come all this way and gather cow butts and penises from bulls? It doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. There's something else going on that it's a lot closer to home. Uh, and and so I'm
Do you
not.
think Chris, do you think the government knows all about? No.
Do I think
Do
the
you think the
government knows?
government knows all about this then?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I had an investigator for the district attorney of the 5 counties of the San Luis Valley. He was the chief investigator for the court, and he was sent to a, um, a workshop on reading gang sign. You know how the graffiti in America, some of the gangs have their own special way of tagging things, and they have their own kind of
Yeah.
sign language that they use. Well, he was sent to a workshop that was being given by a real famous LA gang expert. They even did a movie about this guy, and he was the one teaching the workshop, and it was a 2 day thing. And I think it was the second day. He went out to lunch with the teacher, and the teacher asked him, the retired cop asked him, well, where are you from? Where are you? What part of the country are you investigating? And he told him the San Luis Valley, and the guy immediately said, oh, that's where the cattle mutilations are hot and heavy. And the the DA inspector guy says, yeah, that's right. And he goes, well, I got invited to the the teacher told him I got invited to a closed secret session of a committee in Congress in the House of Representatives, and they were investigating cattle mutilations. This was back in the 80s, and they wanted to know if there was some sort of
Oh my.
occult ritual connection, and so they had me there to talk to me. And he said they knew. He was shocked at how much they knew about the cattle mutilation mystery, and he was also shocked that they were paying any attention to it, that they were actually doing an active investigation, even though it was super hush hush. It was super secret, and he was told not to tell anybody. And he figured, 10, 15 years later, he could confide in a fellow officer. Well, uh, Sean, the investigator, when he told me this, he says, "You're the only person I've ever told this to. So if it gets out, it's on you."
Ah,
So yeah, I do. There is some evidence to support the contention that the U.S. government does know about it, that they may be involved in it. Ted Oliphant, who was a police officer down in Fife, Alabama, in the early '90s, he investigated several dozen cases down there, and he was convinced that Fort Campbell, Kentucky, was sending helicopter crews and they were doing biological weapons testing because they found animals that were really messed up from some sort of biological agent, and it was all hushed up. Very very little word of it made it out of the local area there, and this is where talking with me and David Perkins and others, he became convinced that they were also testing for mad cow disease, and he wrote a paper called "Mad Cows and Mad Cows I Have Known," which you can find online, and it goes into great detail of his particular theory that mad cows is the primary motivation for these cases to be enacted on these victim ranchers and their cows. Um, there's been over 350 helicopter sightings around mutilation sites. Now, Linda Howe will instantly tell you that those are UFOs uh, masquerading as helicopters. And again, Occam's razor. If it looks like a helicopter, it sounds like a helicopter. It it rattles the trees and makes the trees go crazy when they're right above them from the downwash of the prop. Chances are that's a helicopter. And I've had a helicopter expert. He repaired helicopters for the Air Force, and he was a member of the military, and he heard all his trees thrashing outside, and there was no wind, except all his trees are going crazy. And he goes outside. It's 3 in the morning, and there's this big, huge helicopter, a real large one, right above his house. And the cottonwood trees around his house are all being, branches were being knocked off, and leaves were flying
yeah.
all over. And he got really, was beaten down by the downwash of the prop. But he said there was no engine sound. So the only sound was the prop cutting through the air and the sound of breaking branches. And so he freaked out and went back inside and didn't know what to do. it didn't land. It didn't threaten him or anything. And so he went out the next morning with his son, and 4 of his cattle were mutilated. Now, how is it? Now, it's pretty likely that he's going to
Possible.
suspect that there's a connection between the big giant helicopter, silent helicopter over
Yeah.
his house, and finding 4 of his cows dead the next day. I mean, it's kind of hard not to put those two events together. And so, and there's been hundreds of cases like this. We had a case, I think it was in Kansas, where a rancher went out and he'd already lost several head of livestock, and he was not in a good mood about it. And so he went out there. He heard his cows mooing and carrying on. So he grabbed his 30-06 and went out there, and sure enough, there's a helicopter hovering over his herd. So he started firing at the helicopter. He started taking shots at it. Well, the helicopter started firing back.
Oh,
And so he quickly took cover, and then he started taking fire from somebody on the ground. So he was taking fire from 2 directions, one from the chopper and one from some team that was on the ground that was obviously probably involved in mutilating his livestock. And so, he called the sheriff and he called the local cops, and they all came screaming out. And by this time they were gone. And the guy was in fear of his family's safety, so he went back inside and didn't continue to engage with them. And they they made their escape and weren't identified. But and that's pretty unusual for gunfire to be exchanged. But I have 3 sheriffs. One sheriff was replaced by one deputy, and he was replaced by the other deputy. Well, all 3 of them, when 2 of them were deputies, and the sheriff called them up and said, "Hey, we got to get out to so and so's ranch. There's a helicopter there. It's chasing their animals around. Meet me there." They all showed up. The helicopter was still there, and they immediately just got out and started firing at it, and they hit it. They said it was an olive green, military style, helicopter. And the sheriff, I interviewed them. All 3 of them went on the record. I interviewed them all on video. And the sheriff says, we couldn't figure out how the hell that thing made it all the way back to Fort Carson, because it was smoking pretty good, and it wasn't doing very well as it went clang, 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 clang. It flew away. They definitely put a hurt on it. And they were checking all the newspapers and all the.
Did they hear anything? I'm going to say
it was, they heard it.
Did they hear anything about that?
Well, they checked everywhere, all their sources, and nobody. Say again.
Nobody rang them up or anything.
No, they got reports of a smoking helicopter.
Never rang them back.
No, it headed off to the northwest, directly towards Fort Carson. So, Linda says,
"Have you, Chris?
Yeah.
Linda Moulton now. Have you spoke to her?
Who, Linda? Spoke
Yeah,
to
Linda. Yeah. Have you spoken to her a few times?
Yeah,
Linda Moulton now.
Yeah, Linda helped train me back in '93 when I first got involved in all this. She was one of the first people I called, and she very, very graciously spent a couple hours on the phone with me, giving me pointers and tips of how to investigate these cases, how to go about interviewing the ranchers. And I still use the same techniques today, and I'm forever grateful for her. And for the next 3 years, I reported every case that I got. I instantly would tell her, and she would go on coast to coast and these various shows and talk about the cases. Of course, never mention me.
Yeah.
My field investigators reported to me, this amorphous thing. And at the time, it wasn't that big of a deal because I wasn't in it to get any notoriety or anything. But then when I started hearing her claim that she was the one that investigated the case and it hadn't been her, then I started to call her on it, and it got to the point where I just I knew that she basically she was just using me, and I just didn't want to I didn't want to sign off on her alien theory because I was getting too much evidence that supported something very earthbound was behind it. Now there is a paranormal aspect to this that I must mention. It's probably the thing that was involved in 1605 in the shires around London, where all these hundreds of sheep are being mutilated. There is some sort of preternatural predator that exists alongside humanity, and I think that it pops up from time to time, and for reasons still unknown, it predates on livestock, on grass eaters mostly. But I think it's something that may be involved in the kosher slaughter of livestock. If you look at how the Jewish faith looks at slaughtering livestock, it's very interesting that they won't let the belly hit the ground until the animals drain the blood. There's some aspects that are reminiscent of some of the things that we see in the cattle mutilation, the process of cattle, mutilating cattle, and uh, and I do have a sense that there is some sort of supernatural, preternatural, paranormal predator that is behind the high strange cases, which are very rare. But as soon as one of those high strange cases happens, it's like the other groups that are involved somehow they find out very quickly, and they start doing their cases to find out why they were targeting this particular region, and then that's when your other cases start happening, and they spiral outwards up to about 40 miles, and there's at least three different groups that are doing this, and you can tell, the closer to the original case that you find cases, the more professional the cuts are, and the more high strange
Yeah.
the case is. And as you go out away from it, that's where you get into your less proficient surgery, where they sometimes they botch things, and you can see where, like, maybe they're training somebody, and he does this kind of ragged cut, and then the guy goes, "No, you do it like this," and then the cut finishes off perfect. We even have evidence that would suggest that people are being trained how to do this. So I do have a feeling that it's the multiple groups. The main high strange cases are producing these other human oriented or human perpetrated cases, and I think they're looking for some evidence to find out why the original case, was being done in the first place, and or they know why the original case was done, and so they go in and they start looking for whatever it is, and start copycatting the high strange case. Whether they know why that case occurred or not, I don't know. But um, if you really want to get down to it with brass tack, that's as far as I'm willing to stretch my opinion, because I don't have evidence to back up all these all this theorizing and subjective analysis. I'm just, I don't believe any of this stuff. I don't think we have enough evidence to support any of it yet. But if you have to come out and talk about it, these are the things that I think need to be stressed. That we can't put all our eggs in an alien basket and blame aliens for everything that we don't understand. I think that there's other things that are other tenants in the building that we don't know about, like this preternatural predator that I mentioned. I do really have a feeling that it's a real thing, and when it gets
It's
going,
a real. Do you think it comes into our reality then?
yeah, it somehow manifests into our reality. There's there's some sort of shape shifting quality as well, and there have been a couple of reports that Linda, of course, she just touts them morning, noon, and night about this one Sheriff Lou Girodo in Los Animas County in southern part of right on the border with New Mexico in Colorado. He saw two lights that well, he saw a helicopter that morphed into two lights and then flew away in opposite directions, and that convinced him that this was an alien, some sort of alien thing, because he saw flying lights, and he immediately thought, well, it's aliens,
Right.
flying around and masquerading as helicopters. Well, if that was the case, we'd have a lot more accounts of people seeing this and reporting this, but we don't. We only have one sheriff and maybe one other rancher, to my knowledge, has seen this. And out of the thousands and thousands of cases that have occurred, that doesn't that's not enough evidence to hang a whole theory on. You have to be intellectually honest and look at all the data, look at all the evidence, look at all the information that you have collected before you start making jumping to conclusions. And I honestly can't support an alien agenda with all this because there isn't enough empirical evidence to support that. In fact, there's no empirical evidence. It's all anecdotal. Well, I think I think it was a helicopter, but then it turned into two lights and flew away. I mean, maybe if somebody else reported the same thing, then maybe from a different vantage point, then maybe you could start to hang a theory on it. But no, these standalone cases, they just don't hold water. They're not. They just don't. They just don't fulfill the scientific
They don't.
rationale of empirical evidence.
Analysis.
You got to be able to back it up, and so I do think that we're going to see more of these cases. I think the cases are not being reported like they used to be because ranchers know that nothing will come from getting the publicity. Nothing will come except a lot of people
Correct.
tramping around their pasture. And so they're dragging these things off, burying them, burning them, and putting them on a bone pile. They're doing everything they can to even keep their own family from not knowing about it. I've had a couple cases where the family didn't even know that they had mutilated cattle, and it wasn't until they went out counting them and said, "We're missing two." Well, don't worry about those two. Well, what happened to them? Well, I don't. You don't want to know. So it's getting to the point now where maybe 1 in 20 of these things are being reported. I used to think it was 1 in 10 were being reported. Now I think it's more like 1 in 20 are being reported. So I think this is something that's burbling along. It's not going anywhere. If it ever gets to the point where we have 8 states hit in one single night, then people like myself are going to be in high demand, trying to help law enforcement and investigators figure out what the hell's going on. And I'm willing to do that. But I've investigated my last dead cow. I refuse to be downwind of another stinky, necrotic, you know, cadaverine laden carcass. It's my least favorite thing to do in the world. And I've done I put my 200 in. Now I can train somebody else to put their 200 in. I just won't do it anymore. It's just
Exactly.
it's too gross, man. I don't know.
Exactly.
My girlfriend wouldn't even let me in the
Well, it
house a
is,
couple.
but it's true what you're saying about farmers. I know from talking to other people that said that some farmers won't tell another farmer, but he's lost some sheep. He won't tell him at all. Even if he found them dead, he still would not tell the other farmer next to him. Keeps it
Yeah,
quiet.
yeah, yeah, and that's the same thing that Philip Hoyle told me. He had a really difficult time getting these guys to open up and talk to him about these things, and when he did get somebody to talk about it, that guy got ridiculed by his neighbors and by the sheep herding community because they know there's something to it, but they figure if they can dog the other sheep herder to keep quiet about it, they won't get some undue attention and get publicity that they don't want. So that's basically my story, and I'm sticking to it. I do urge everybody, if you have an interest in this America and the world's greatest unsolved serial crime spree, that you check it out. I'm not going to send any books to England, but I will graciously send e versions of the book via the internet. And so if you want an e version of
Yeah.
the book,
So,
contact me.
yeah, I was just going to say that. Where can people get your book? If they want to get in touch with you, got an email address or anything?
Yeah, it's a TMV guy. T is in the, M is in mysterious, V is in valley. TMV guy, that's me, at gmail.com. And of course, England, Amazon, England, UK, Amazon has copies of my book. So if you want to get a hard copy, talk to
Yeah.
Amazon.uk, and then if you want to just get a an e version, I'd be more than happy to send it to you.
Oh, lovely. Stalking the herd. 90 pages, did you say?
900 is when I finished it. Now it's 600.
900,
Well, it's 600. I took 300 pages out.
600 pages. Ah,
It's
right.
it's pretty thorough.
Steph just said, really enjoyed the show tonight, Bob. What a great guest. Janice had just said, good night, everyone. Great show, Bob, and a great guest. Thank you. That's Janice. They've all enjoyed the show tonight. Nobody knows, but you're in hospital as well. And you're
Yeah,
doing it from the library in the hospital.
yeah. That's all right. I'm going home tomorrow, so
Had you answered? Yeah,
they're
oh,
letting me
yes.
out.
Let's hope you're going home tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I'm going home tomorrow for. And
Yes.
it's not because of my good behavior either. I think they're kicking me out because they got tired of me. All right,
I like that.
all right.
Joanne just said a great show again with a great guest. Thank you,
Well, thank you.
Christopher. You've been
Yeah, my pleasure.
a great guest and lots
Thanks
of
a lot.
knowledge.
You guys take care.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Good night
Good night.
and take care of yourself. Good night.